Welcome everyone to another angle. Today I'm here joined by a very dear and very well-known nutritional therapy practitioner, Mickey Trescott. And yeah, I think we can just get started by saying, hello, Mickey, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. It is a pleasure to have you. To start with, who is Mickey? How would you describe yourself?
Interesting question. I wear many hats. So I am a nutritional therapy practitioner by training. I also was a chef in a former life. So I've combined both of those backgrounds to provide resources for people who are looking to live well with autoimmune disease. So this is something that I have personal experience with. And I do everything from teaching people how to cook, people who have never had to cook because now they've been faced with a diagnosis of a health condition that means they need to eat differently, all the way up to partnering and training medical providers and doctors in the Autoimmune Protocol and running medical studies to determine the efficacy of dietary changes with autoimmune disease. So there's kind of a big range, but I'm really passionate about living well with autoimmune disease, about doing the things that we can do as patients to give ourselves the best chance of finding health, whatever that means. Some people need to combine conventional and alternative medicine. Some people can just do a dietary change and feel great. There's a big range of what people can do for themselves in order to live well. But I am fascinated and curious about what all of those things are and how to share that information with the public so that they can do that for themselves.
It is quite interesting because sometimes you find like the most in-depth expertise and the most in-depth knowledge really comes from personal sufferings or from personal experiences. So as you may, as may a lot of people actually know that you started this journey out of your own experience with two autoimmune diseases. So would you like to take us through that journey and how did that develop into becoming more of a passion that you wanted to really delve more into?
Yeah, so when I was 26, I was diagnosed with both Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the thyroid, and celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the small intestine. And this was after about a year of having some pretty serious health problems. I'll spare you guys the whole story, but I went to 6 different doctors, and with each appointment, I was told that perhaps I was depressed, that, it was all in my head. I was met with a lot of skepticism from the conventional doctors that I was seeing, not really wanting to take my concerns seriously or wanting to do further testing. And with every visit, I kind of would leave and be really demoralized and disappointed. But then I would have these symptoms that ultimately led to me losing my job, being bedridden, and just escalating that I started to do my own research and try to figure out how I could advocate for myself and get a diagnosis. So 6 doctors in, I knew that I had been suffering from a thyroid disorder, but based on symptoms, but I really couldn't get the test that I needed. And I finally found a doctor that would do the testing. And he actually also tested me not only for antibodies. So when you have an autoimmune disease, you end up with antibodies to whatever tissue your body is destroying. So for thyroid, there's a couple antibodies. So I found a doctor that would do the test. And he also agreed to test celiac antibodies, and those came back positive too. So I got a little surprise along with the thyroid, which I knew from my symptoms that that's probably what I had. So, but the diagnosis was just the first step, but it wasn't really the turning point. So after my diagnosis, I was still denied treatment for my thyroid, conventional treatment, which is thyroid hormone. I was told that I wasn't experiencing enough variation in my lab results to warrant treatment. And I was really sick. I was bedridden. I lost feeling on half of my body. My hair had almost completely fallen out. I was just exhausted going up the stairs. I could only do it a couple times a day. So I had to ration my trips up and down the stairs. And so I really started seeking information that would help me feel better on my own because my medical team, didn't really have anything for me besides let's wait 6 months and see how it progresses and then maybe talk about investigating the potential of having some other autoimmune diseases and needing to get treatment for those. So that's when I discovered the Autoimmune Protocol. I had been vegan for 10 years before I did this. So I made a really big shift into eating animal foods and then doing an elimination diet where I cut out a bunch of foods that had been identified in the medical literature as problematic for people with autoimmune disease. And we have a great body of evidence showing all these specific foods could be potentially problematic. And then doing reintroduction. So, reintroducing food slowly and discovering a dietary template that works for me. And that's how I recovered my health. So, um, kind of hard to do in a nutshell, but that's the story.
Amazing. It's always fascinates me whenever I hear a story of someone who went into this kind of inwards kind of self-discovery sort of journey to understand how their body really works. And you had to go through that maybe out of a necessity, was it? Or did you find it quite more of a something that you've always wanted to do before, and that was like the time that you actually had to do it in order to get yourself better?
Well, I've always been interested in nutrition. So I started a vegan diet when I was in college. I was curious. I had some friends that did it, and I noticed some health benefits when I transitioned. Now, I know from experience now that I am actually allergic to dairy, which I didn't know at one point. And also, this period of time, I started cooking for myself for the first time and eating lots of vegetables. And so I was doing things that we know promote health, eating less processed food, eating out less, cooking your own food, eating lots of vegetables. But I think 10 years in, I wasn't really aware of the nutrition deficiencies and how impactful that is for someone with autoimmune disease. So when I was going through this transition, even before when I got really sick and I was faced with like, what do I do next? I really thought the diet could be a part of it, even though I'd asked my doctors, like, hey, is this diet affecting me? They said, well, probably not. That's actually like a really healthy way to eat. It turns out the diet had a lot to do with it. And so when I dipped my toes in little by little and, like I started eating meat, I expected to feel terrible, but I actually noticed things change, sometimes quickly, sometimes over a long period of time. Like, with hypothyroidism, you have a really low body temperature. I was always very cold. If I took my temperature, it was 95 or 96 degrees. Like I was very, very hypothyroid, very low body temperature. And after the first time I ate meat, my temperature went up to 97. And so I could take that information and go, well, that had something in it that my body was received as like stimulating.
So were you ever curious what is that thing in meat that actually got you better? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of research that actually tells you eating meat is really wrong, regardless of what people say. But maybe in your case, it was a bit different. So, was there anything that you were able to find or discover in meat that was of such a importance as a nutrient that maybe not just you, everyone might actually need to have in their diet one way or another?
Yeah, and actually, we can't really research the difference between eating meat and not eating meat because we're not talking about the quality of the meat. We're not talking about, grass-fed, pastured meat. The nutritional profile is completely different. So, with my nutritionist hat on, I can say that pork can have a 30-to-1 omega 6 to omega 3 ratio. So this is the pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory fats. Pork that's raised with grain, conventionally with grain, has a 30-to-1. This is like standard inflammatory diet. We don't want that ratio. It causes rampant inflammation. The same pigs fed grass and allowed to forage and run free, they have a 3 or a 4-to-1 ratio, which is what our ancestors had. So the same food, it's not about the category of food, it's about specifically how that food was raised. So part of the work that I do is, not is meat bad, is meat good? It's what is the meat? Where are we buying this meat from? Are we buying it from farms that are raising their meat ethically, sustainably, and in a way that provides the most nutrient density? And so about your question about the nutrients in meat, yes, there are nutrients in meat that you can't get from plant foods. And I learned this the hard way. There's iron. Iron is essential, especially with people with autoimmune disease. Both my autoimmune diseases come with the effects of not absorbing and processing iron the way a healthy person would. So people with hypothyroidism have issues with iron, and also people with celiac because it affects our digestive tract. So eating plenty of iron and heme iron, that only comes from animal products. vitamins B12, vitamins A, vitamin D. These are fat soluble vitamins. A lot of people go, wait, you can't get vitamin D from food. You can actually, especially cold water, fatty fish. So all of these nutrients are actually critically important for the immune system. And part of why I believe people with autoimmune disease, I've seen a lot of pescatarians make a recovery without eating any land animals or any poultry. But really, the minimum is to really dig in with some seafood, because nutrient density wise, it is very, very hard to get the immune system the raw nutrients that it needs in order to function optimally. And this doesn't mean, eating excessive meat. I've written a lot about how eating a little meat, especially if that meat is the most high quality, nutrient dense meat, is the best way forward, because it lines up with sustainability. It gives us all the raw nutrients we need. Often these are the most affordable cuts of meat, so the ones that have the most nutrient density are the ones nobody else wants. And yeah, so that's what I think about that.
Interesting, because like the moment that you start mentioning the sourcing the right type of meat in order to make sure that you get the right amount of nutrients, so that you can have a healthier kind of diet, the first thing that comes to my mind is like these categories that you'll find in the supermarket that tells you organic, but it's like double the price, whenever it comes like with an additional thing from the standard type of meat that you would get in the supermarket, always like with an additional cost. So you're saying it's actually not necessarily that type of product that you would need to source in order to get that type of nutrients.
Yeah, so I don't advocate for buying meat at the grocery store at all. Actually, I advocate for buying from a farmer. So if by going directly to the farmer, you know exactly where your meat's coming from. A lot of these small family farms are the ones that are actually truly pasture raising their animals. They're the ones who are harvesting them ethically, which is really important to me. And it's the way that you get the best cost, because you cut out the grocery store. So organic meat, organic on meat is not really a label that means anything. Grass fed, pastured, those are things that you could look for, but you're going to pay a lot in the grocery store. So yeah, I am a big advocate for going directly to the farm, seeing where these animals grow up. And then also you can then take the cuts that most people don't want. So like with chickens, I buy whole chickens. I never buy chicken parts, because I want to use that entire chicken. I want to use the bones to make broth. That broth has gelatin and collagen and things that our tissues use to repair. And just by using chicken breast, all you're getting from a chicken breast is protein. It's not actually that nutritious. But by eating all of the dark meat and using the skin, you actually get the nutrients that is contained in that whole package.
So would you say that you're now an anti that trend about veganism?
I'm not on either side. I believe that the way that I eat actually is more plant-based than my vegan diet was, because when I ate vegan, I ate processed food. I ate a lot of beans and grains. That was the bulk of my diet. And now the bulk of my diet is actually vegetables with a medicinal dose of meat for the nutrients that I know I need for my body to thrive. So, yeah, I'm not in the business of convincing anyone which way to eat. If that works for you, I would say like try it and see how you feel. But I know that at 10 years in, my hair was falling out. I had neurological issues. I was bedridden. I tried going to a nutritionist who specialized in working with vegans, and we tried supplementation aggressively for months, and it didn't work. And I started eating animal foods. Today, I take almost no supplements, just like a probiotic. And I understand that, when I get my labs taken, my iron's low. I just need to eat a little more red meat. I even eat organ meats and liver that has a lot of this nutrient density, and that's how I feel my best. So, and everybody, some people thrive off of eating more meat, and some people thrive off of eating less meat. I actually thrive off of eating in the spectrum of people that eat meat. I don't eat very much, but I know that I need it in order to feel well.
Absolutely. I feel like the keyword is moderation and everything. So just to jump into the autoimmune wellness. So tell us a little bit more about this. It's a venture that you co-founded. So what is it about?
So, Autoimmune Wellness is a website that I founded, and then I brought on my partner Angie Alt in 2015. We decided to partner, and it's basically a website that's devoted to putting all the information out there publicly about the Autoimmune Protocol, which is an elimination diet. It's the elimination diet I did originally years ago. I can't even think, 9 years now. And this movement is something that we kind of fanned the flames and tried to build through community. And what started out was a space for us to share our stories, but then we started sharing stories of community members and providing recipes and guidance. And now it's grown into a venue where we crowdfund money for medical studies. We partner with doctors. We publicize the results of the research that has been quite good. And so it's a really great way to give back to a community of people who, like me, when I was trying to get diagnosed, have been through a lot of doctors, have been through a lot of dismissal, have been through being told that there's nothing they can do to live well with autoimmune disease. And we just want to put all of that information out there so that they can be empowered and use that information to better their own lives.
So would you encourage people who might have any type of problems with digestion or any problems with their metabolism in general to go through that same protocol of the autoimmune protocol?
I think anybody who, you know, has a health issue could benefit from an elimination diet. So, an elimination diet is when we remove a certain foods and then you reintroduce them to see how tolerant you are to those foods. A lot of people might think, well, I already know what food I'm sensitive to. There's an effect that the immune system has when you remove something for a period of time. It's usually about 3 weeks is kind of the threshold, but I like to go at least a month, where when you remove it completely, 100% compliance, and then you reintroduce it, the immune system hasn't been reacting to it all the time, and it will give you a stronger effect than previous. So you can kind of see, like, when I did this for the first time and I reintroduced soy, I got a rash up my arms, and I'd never gotten a rash with soy. I had eaten lots of soy in my life, but because the slate was cleared, it was really obvious, like, oh my gosh, I don't do well with that. So I think anybody can benefit from an elimination diet, especially people who have symptoms that they haven't been able to resolve after they've talked to their doctor about them. Definitely, I don't recommend self-doctoring. Go to see your doctor and just clear everything with them. But people with autoimmune disease, there are food triggers that are more prevalent with people with autoimmune disease. And we have a lot of research. There's a book called The Paleo Approach by Sarah Ballantyne. She's a PhD medical biophysicist, and she wrote a book with 2,000 references going through each category food: grains and beans, legumes, eggs, nuts, seeds, dairy, and basically weighing the pros, the cons, the medical research, and formulating what we know as the autoimmune protocol. The autoimmune protocol is recommended for people who have autoimmune disease. So, with someone with digestive issues, I would say maybe try cutting out something like grains and dairy, maybe eggs. There's some foods you can work down the spectrum, but I wouldn't go whole hog and do the elimination diet meant for people with autoimmune disease, because it is quite restrictive and it is quite hard, and there are downsides to being on a restricted protocol. Like, you can't eat out, you got to cook all your food. It's hard on your social life. So yeah, there's a little difference there. And then some people even modify the autoimmune protocol. So working with a nutritionist or a health coach or a doctor who's familiar, they might have a specific modification that's built in just for them. But that's part of the work I do, is helping people get into the most customized way to do a protocol and then work through that protocol through reintroductions. And then where you land is not, it's not a diet, it's your diet. It's your empowerment, knowing, how a food affects you and what kind of reaction you're going to get. You can make a decision to eat that food or not.
Knowing exactly the effects of that food on your body.
Yeah.
That's really empowering in its own right, actually, having that knowledge, what works for you and what doesn't. So you're a supporter of there's no diet, there's no one single diet for everyone. So there are a lot of promoters for these kind of one diet. It is the best for humanity and it is the best for the universe and the planet. But you wouldn't be a supporter for such approach, would you?
No. No, I'm a promoter of nutrient density. So, I've written a lot about the autoimmune protocol, how to do the protocol, and, where everybody ends up is different, even in people that have the same disease and have the same symptoms. Like I have Hashimoto's and celiac, and I know some celiacs that do fine with dairy. I don't do fine with dairy. I know some people with Hashimoto's who can eat nightshades, which are tomatoes and peppers and things like that. I can have a little bit. Some other people I know can have some. Some people can't. So we're all ending up on this unique diet, which I really like. But when we focus on nutrient density, every human needs nutrients. Every human needs the raw materials for their body to create their skin and their hair and make their immune system function. So when I work with the public and when I'm working with people that maybe don't fall under this umbrella of chronic illness, nutrient density is a concept that it's not a dietary concept, but you can it's not a diet in itself, but you can apply it to any diet. You can apply it to a vegan diet, you can apply it to a keto diet, you can apply it to an AIP. And actually part of the autoimmune protocol is actually not just removing foods, but actually adding foods. And that's part of why I think we've seen such success with people with autoimmune disease and in the studies that we've done to test the efficacy is because it's not just about the things you're taking out, it's about the things we're adding in. So we're asking people to eat fermented foods that improve gut health. We're asking people to eat cuts of animal foods that are high quality and have the highest nutrient density. We're asking them to eat things like cold water fatty fish, which is anti-inflammatory. We're asking them to eat lots of colorful vegetables, things like that. We're asking them to eat bone broth, which is really healing to the skin and the gut. So it's about those added things, but anybody can apply that to their diet. Anybody can start eating more cold water fish. Anybody can start eating more vegetables. So that's why I love nutrient density. And if I were to say like what way of eating do I think is good for everyone, I think that it applies to a pregnant like mother to be. It applies to children. It applies to people who are aging. It applies to athletes. All of us can really learn something when we look at the nutrients that we're actually eating.
That was really, really insightful. I would like to actually close off by asking you, what would be your message to people that would be listening to us and still like trying to figure out the best diet for them out of your own experience? So, what would be the single one most important thing that they could start off today, right now, maybe, and they can just like get into that journey of self-discovery to find the right diet for them?
Yeah, I love what you said about journey of self-discovery because I think a lot of people get into the mindset that I'm going to do this for a week or 2 weeks or a month, or they like the challenge mindset, which I think can be helpful to get into something the first time, but it's hard to apply long term without that feeling of like white knuckling and deprivation. So, what I would say is commit yourself to the lifelong process of living well and understand that that process is going to be messy. There isn't going to be a day where you have it all figured out and you're healthy and nothing affects you anymore. You're going to go into this knowing that it's not black and white. You can decide what layers you want to add. You can decide when to reintroduce foods when you want. You can take a couple steps back, take 10 steps forward. I mean, that is the healing journey. So be gentle on yourself, take it slow. And actually, if you can't go in all in, don't be afraid to temper your approach. So maybe like there's a lot going on in the world right now. Maybe like a dietary challenge, restricting a ton of foods is not in the cards for you. So maybe you're just going to go gluten free. That's a great start. Then once that's easy for you, you do gluten and dairy free. Once that's easy for you, you take out sugar. You don't have to go all in and do it all at once. Because for me, I tell my story a lot on podcasts and people are always like, wow, you really made this recovery. It must have been so fast. It was about 3 years until I started getting back to the point before I got sick. And that 3 years, if I knew at the beginning it would have taken that long, I would have been a little more gentle on myself for understanding the long game and realizing that it was going to take a while, and that those things that I put into practice were going to have to continue ebbing and flowing for the rest of my life.
Amazing. Love it. I really love it. Thank you so much, Mickey. That was
Yeah.
really, really great speaking with you, and thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Thanks for having me.